Where's the microphone? Sorry? We've got a question here. Okay, well, while it's coming over there, I'm going to put a question here to Ian about privacy. We're coming back to privacy, and this is from the audience at the New York Public Library, so welcome back to you. The point made is the concern regarding privacy is not my public tweets, it's when I'm searching online. Without privacy, there is no freedom of speech. Is this a concern for anyone on the panel? Do you think that there should be a privacy algorithm when Googling, for example? Anybody got any thoughts on this? That privacy relates to when searching online, that your search...
I don't see how that can work. If you put something... I'm not quite sure what's being said, that you should put something online, but it should not be searchable.
I mean, I understand what the users say, because we actually at Mumsnet have we've created a forum which is called Off the Beaten Track, which we purposely exclude Google from searching. And that's because of user demand for that. And it also things get deleted and not archived from there very quickly. So I think there will be a demand for this. Whether it's something Google will listen to, I don't know.
Interesting.
I think that I think it's probably the most rapidly evolving aspect of online culture is privacy right now. I think that what you'll probably see is the lines being drawn a lot sharper. I mean, Facebook have essentially just been, blurring the lines massively between completely private and completely public over the last few years, and just playing around with that and seeing what works. And they've been very, very bold, and they've so far got away with it. I mean, they get slapped about a bit by their users, and like 100 people, 1,000 people join a group, and then it just goes away. And they've never really had any major fallout from it, but they've never really had a really bad incident as a result of lack of kind of privacy controls. I think what you'll see is like less of this like grey scale. We're kind of private. You've got 50 million privacy settings that you can set and become semi-public, semi-private. I think you'll see truly anonymous social networking, like chat roulette, where it's not tied to a user.
Well, what's interesting is that MySpace was a sort of anonymous place, and what was different about Facebook was that the whole point of it was you were who you said you were, and there may be a place out there for another network that is where you can be anonymous. I mean, that there is a need out there, I'm sure.
I just think if you launched a truly awesome networking product that was anonymous, there's just going to be so many teenagers that will jump all over it, because like, who the hell wants this stuff documented for the next 10 years of your life from 14 onwards? I think it will come, and it will be explosive when it comes, and it'll probably grow faster than chat roulette did, and it'll grow bigger. But
let's take the question up there.
Hi, it's just building on something that Justine was saying about don't stifle debate. So I guess my question is, do you as Mumsnet or any of you share your own opinions? And what are the risks in doing so? Or do you just stay neutral and let people debate amongst themselves?
Well, we certainly tried to stay neutral, particularly because we want to be a site for all mothers and fathers, and not just ones of a particular, say, for instance, political leaning. So during the election, we had every sort of shade of politician come through our doors and do web chats. And we definitely, it is a philosophy that we put aside any personal preference and gave them all equal treatment. Because I think that's an advantage that we have over, say, newspapers who are so clearly aligned and partisan in this country. And it is, after all about our user group. It's not about our opinions anyway. So the only thing I personally show bias on is football teams, which I hope doesn't upset too many people.
Question online, which I'm going to put to you, Fraser, about what's been your biggest social media mistake? Anything come to mind there, or indeed any of the panel on this one? Go on, Rory. You started.
Well, I was the victim of a bug on Twitter with TwitPic, and I was going around BBC News studios doing various lives and taking shots as I went. And putting them on Twitter. And I posted one of the News 24, as it was then, studio, and somebody came straight back and said, "Did you mean that?" And I went into it, and there was a frankly interesting shot of a young lady wearing absolutely nothing in an interesting pose. And it was a bug in TwitPic. Right. And I went into a massive panic and managed to delete the tweet. But then I blogged about it, so full disclosure.
Sure. How about you, Fraser? Is there anything that you've done as you've been progressing through and telling the story of Super Jam as you've come along? Anything that you felt not worked and that you've regretted?
I don't know. Occasional footage of me dancing at tea parties with the guests. It's probably the most embarrassing.
One big piece of advice I'd say, and I'm not saying this is necessarily from personal experience, is you should never engage on a social network when you're either very angry or very drunk.
Yes. That point has been made before at these forums, in fact, yes. Take a deep breath. The microphone with the lady there, yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ian. Just now you mentioned the exponential growth. So I was wondering, is there a critical mass of people that needs to be reached before this become possible? Or and how do you get that extra 1.3 people you just mentioned?
Yeah, it was a really interesting point that you made there. And I mean, obviously it's going to vary from network to network, from customer base to customer base. But do you want to just sort of develop that thought a bit?
Yeah. So I think that the really interesting thing about exponential growth. Can we bring the Mumsnet presentation back up with a slide of the graph? Any way of doing that?
Well, keep on going, and then we'll see if we can.
I mean, if you kind of go back to GCSE maths and you've got the exponential curve, at the start it doesn't look exponential; it looks linear. But you've still got the same underlying formula, which is more people inviting more people, and it's snowballing.
Oh, there we are. Yeah.
No,
wrong
bit
one.
further
It's the
It's about number 2.
slide number 2, please.
Yeah. So if you sort of looked at Mumsnet, from here to here, you might think that was just a sort of straight line graph, but as more time goes on, it's clear it's an exponential graph. But the underlying trend is that I'm sure that the mums joining the site here found it really useful and invited other mums to the site and told their friends that care groups about it. So the underlying formula holds the same, but there are some interesting kind of multipliers. Like I imagine the more mums on the site, the more good content, and so the more when a new mum comes to the site, the more useful stuff they find. So it all multiplies. So yeah, I'll be willing to take a bet on 100 million by end of the year.
Just
Take it, I can't lose.
Justine, has there been a moment on that graph where you've recognised that this isn't just ordinary, good, honest growth, and it's something out of the ordinary?
No, not really. I mean, you can see it's quite a smooth curve. So there was, I mean, the sort of Eureka moment for us came very early on because I started off on the forums posting mostly to myself. And there was an occasion where a friend rang me up and said, "Oh, I've got terrible back pain," and she was pregnant and I'd had kids, and I said, "Well, I'll answer you, but you have to post on Mumsnet first," in a ruthless way. And by the time
those local radio phone-ins when they would get their mums to call in.
Yes, exactly. So she posted, and I felt guilty, and I rushed to get there, and someone else had got there. So, and at that point, I thought, "Whoa, there's something else going on here."
Right.
And from there, it just it worked. It became useful.
Excellent. Now, we've got a question online here about, because as you rightly pointed out, Rory, we don't want to just focus on Twitter and Facebook and the like. And there's how important is having a blog for business and business growth? And I'd like to put this to you, Fraser, but I'd like to sort of add on to this a bit, bringing in another question received via Twitter about no one has mentioned B2B in the discussion this evening. Now, we're primarily B2C businesses, but I wondered in your engagement with your business customers, i.e. the multiples and all the outlets out there, what role does social media and perhaps your blog play in that engagement, which is a smaller set of customers, but, pretty critical?
Yeah, well, I guess the blog came first, and probably for most businesses that have been around for a few years, that would have been the first thing that they started up, and that's kind of charted the whole process from, more or less when I first started making jam in the kitchen. And so, there will be people who have followed that story all the way through. And I guess in a blog, you can tell people a whole story and not just a little snippet of what you're doing. So I think you can, write a lot more, and people can really be there with you to a greater extent. I don't know. I guess the supermarkets probably do look at Twitter and all the rest of it, and see what's being said about things. Ocado have just allowed people to start reviewing grocery products on their website, which is, so I guess like reviews and what people are saying, that's really powerful. And so, when you're selling a product, it's less and less about what you shout in somebody's face. This product is the best. People will look at reviews and see what mums are saying about it or whoever. So I think that's pretty cool.
I think what's happened over the last 5 years has actually broken down, those B2B, B2C terms that came up 10 years ago, and I sort of scratched my head on I think they've been broken down. I think on Twitter, I'm engaged, if you could call it B2B, I am talking to companies a lot, and I'm talking to consumers a lot in terms of audiences, and I think people are, and that's one of the slightly difficult things that a lot of companies, particularly big brands, are finding, that they don't quite understand the terms of the conversation, but they know they have to be there.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult one for large businesses, not represented in this audience so much, but you're right, yes.
The other thing I'd just say, if you are blogging, who are you blogging for exactly? Are you blogging for your customers or your staff or your consumers? You aren't necessarily wanting to give the same spin on what you're saying to those three different constituents. So it's hard to be honest and transparent, and I think we've all agreed that there's no point doing anything in social media if you're not being honest and transparent.